Hi, Beth.
Hi, Terry.
I'm so glad you're going to be with us today. So tell us your name, and then we're going to talk about family, and I'm going to invite you to answer some questions.
Sure. So I'm Beth Wolslegel. I worked at Westwood Lutheran Church as a children's minister up until just a month ago when I decided to be stay-at-home mom.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to that story that we're going to get to talk about. So let's start with today's theme is looking at family through the lens of culture. And well, there's a lot that we could say about that. But let's start with your own family of origin. You grew up with, what did your family look like?
So I grew up with my mother and father and my younger brother in Fargo, North Dakota. And my parents still live in the house I grew up in. So we never moved, transferred, stayed. And my brother was 2 years younger than me, but 3 years in school. Okay. So they kind of held him back.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So you lived in that community. You went to college.
I did, yeah. So I went to Morehead State, which I like to say I went to another state, which is more than what some people do.
Which is how many miles away from your home?
Probably 7.
Okay, good.
And I majored in early childhood special education, and I loved that. And then at the end of my schooling, I was working at a church on Wednesdays and student teaching on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I really liked waking up on Wednesday more than I did on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So kind of moved into that realm and then went off to seminary.
And that you did really move.
I did.
Didn't you?
So after I did spend a year in India at through the Young Adult and Global Mission.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went to Berkeley, or PLTS.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 years out there, and then came to Luther for a year to do children, youth, and family stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to get back to some of those questions about Christian public leadership in a minute. But so, what does your family look like today? Does it look like the one you grew up in, Beth?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So, So, I married a woman, which was a surprise to everyone, including myself, I think.
Yeah.
And so Marcy and I have been married for 5 years, 3 years legally. And Marcy has 2 daughters, Emma, who is now 16, and Jess, who is now 20. And then we recently decided to do foster care, so we've had Benjamin with us a year today.
Wow.
Actually.
Cool.
And he is 2.5, and we just got his brother Jackson, who is now 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a crazy journey.
Yeah.
So let's start with, you said this isn't maybe the image you had of family.
Right.
Of that. So start about just kind of like, all right, so you married a woman that had 2 children.
Right.
So you not only got married, but you became a step parent all at once.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, so that was crazy. I think it was mostly crazy because she's older, so her kids are older.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't anyone to even talk to about what is it like to have 12-year-old kids.
They weren't just step kids that were 2.
Right.
They had been formed and shaped.
Yes, and they do have a relationship with their father, and they see him half the time, and so that also is hard because it's not just our household rules or our household boundaries or our system. There's another system that comes into our system all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how did your family of origin, or people that maybe that had a similar kind of view of family, how was that for you as both a spouse and a parent or step parent or whatever you were at that time with the children?
Yeah, I probably didn't do it well. And I think I've found my groove a lot more. It was also hard. We moved into the house together about a month before we got married. And so we had never lived together. We had never done this together. So I just tried to be, I don't know, my parents were loving. And so I tried to love on them and set boundaries for them and myself, which was probably where it didn't always work. Yeah. I was bad cop which it's not the role that
Yeah.
a step parent should ever play.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I was probably clearer and healthier at that point than Marcy maybe was, and that their dad was, and so, that's just kind of how that went. But
what's your relationship like today? They're older.
They're older.
And
Yeah.
that's a different stage.
It's good. Yeah, it's so much better. And I've let go of a lot of things too. Yeah. It's fun to see kind of the new relationships I get to have with them now in a different way. I think it was also hard because it wasn't like I was the mother of the household in a step-parent relationship. They had their mother, and so I didn't know what my role should be in that. So I think that was actually probably the biggest rub, is I really wanted to be a mom, and I couldn't be. And so now, I am a mom in a different, I fill hair and makeup and cooking role of motherhood, and Marcy fulfills, emotional digestion, processing piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about, you said about wanting to be a mom, and it's different when you're a stepmom,
Very different.
and they're older, right?
Mhm.
You didn't have the preschooler, you didn't have the elementary school play kind of thing.
Right.
So talk about your own sense of being a mom.
Well, I think,
That's a whole longer video.
it's a
I
whole
know,
longer
but-
video. So we tried to get pregnant for about a year, and with a few successes and a few failures. So clearly that's not the route that my family took. So that's why we looked into foster care. And I think that's the biggest thing I've wrestled with as a step-parent, or as, I think even in the life of the church, I made a comment at my going away party, thank you for lending your children to me for these last 8 years, because I think that's where that fulfillment came from even more, was just in ministry, and be able to walk alongside some of these kids for a few years and see them grow up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, for sure. So not gonna adopt, but be foster parents.
Right.
Talk about, each of these is its own set of parenting trickiness, right?
Yeah, totally.
So talk about parenting foster kids.
So our original goal was to do foster to adopt. So
Yep.
that's where we would love to have gone, or love to go. And I don't know, we're still kind of, I call it purgatory. We're not in any decisive place right now in this cycle of care with these two boys. But yeah, so I think I kind of just keep framing it back in ministry, sort of, or, I worked at camp for a number of summers, so you love on these kids for a week, and you have no idea where they go, right? And even in ministry, you love on these kids for an hour, or
Right.
or whatever,
Right.
a week, and they live their life outside of that, and all you can do is what you can do in that moment. And so, if they leave, it's going to be really hard, don't get me wrong, but I do think I just try to keep it in perspective. I am called to be their parent right now, and that even meant leaving my job, which was crazy. So,
Yeah.
but that's what needed to happen.
So, how is it different being a parent, right, a foster parent for a short term versus a volunteer person in a church, right? So, you're totally in on this.
We're in.
You're not seeing this temporary if you're quitting your job, right?
Right.
And you're just being full-time because they're little,
They're little.
right?
Yeah.
So how does that connect into this deeper sense of you? Because I think culturally, we've framed mom, we've framed
Right.
parenting, we've framed familying in particular kind of categories. You've even talked about
Right.
that, some expectations.
Right.
This kind of fights a lot of those categories, and yet there's something,
Yes.
I think, in you that you're like, even if I don't have all the words, this
Yeah.
is parenting for me.
Totally. It is. It's different because it is nice. And so they have family that's involved in their life.
Yeah.
So it's not, and they also came with some systems of being,
Yeah.
but totally different as an 18-month-old when he
Yeah.
came into our house.
Yes.
And so it feels very different that we get to set the pattern and the cadence of life. And so he is the one who reminds us to pray. He loves to sing Johnny Appleseed, and so he goes, oh. You know, and it's been fun to just watch how we get to play on each other in this role of learning together. And that is totally different than volunteer work in ministry. It's not the same kind of building the structure together piece.
Yeah. And it's intense.
It is intense, yes.
I heard at urgent care
I
at
was.
the doctor yesterday.
No, well, Tuesday was intense.
Yeah.
Yesterday was much better.
So, but just that sense of that, their health, their well-being, their
Mhm.
emotional, their relationality is
Right.
part of your job,
Right.
right, as a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, that's probably the scariest part is not, you held on to that a little bit as a volunteer.
Yeah.
But you hold on to that totally differently as a parent to wonder so I see these little sparks of different things, like, Benjamin could totally be an engineer or a musician, like he's got great beat.
Awesome.
Or
Awesome.
a gymnast because he's already just doing flips across like he's 2.5.
Wow.
So it's fun to just wonder, I
Huh.
wonder what he's gonna do with that.
Huh.
And I think that's where some of the grief comes in, is not knowing, I might not get to follow that up.
Yeah.
Or to see these sparks of anger too and just wonder, I hope that doesn't brew.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these go against some cultural things in your own understanding from growing up, your own experience,
Mhm.
but also the culture around you. You talked about we were, married twice because of in
Right.
Minnesota, for people that don't know,
Right.
that became legal,
Mhm.
during
Right.
that time. So talk about what it was like, kind of being countercultural
Mm.
in familying, and you can pick anyone or all of these, right, to talk
Right.
about that.
I think I'm finally to the point where I'm just like, yep, we're gonna be countercultural. But for so long, I think I wrestled with that myself. I'm just, this wasn't the life I had laid out, as a little girl. This is not where I went.
Yeah.
Foster care wasn't ever out of the option for me. I had extended family that had
Oh.
fostered.
Okay.
And one of my close mentors at church had done fostering.
Huh.
So I think I always knew that might be part of my story or our story. But I didn't think I'd marry an older woman with kids and do that whole thing. I find it super fascinating or interesting how other people respond.
Huh.
I was just at a workshop and everyone in the room was like, whoa. I thought I had stuff. You have
Right.
stuff. And if I step back and think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what the are we doing? But it doesn't feel like work in the same way. It's life-giving now, and it feels like our house was just, what night? That was Tuesday night. So Tuesday night.
Mm-hmm.
So just a chaotic day. I don't think I've been that tired ever as a mother in this period. And we all finally sat down for dinner, and Marcy actually said, I'm sorry, I know that this has been crazy. I know this might not be what you've asked for, but I kind of love it.
Oh,
And it felt,
makes me cry.
yeah, and the girls were just yeah.
Oh.
And so these boys are loved on by 4 beautiful women.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is crazy.
Yeah.
but you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And this is what I know right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit any definition. I mean, it fits this now modern family view of
Yeah.
family. But yeah.
So who do you look to for mentors, or how do you find conversation partners? Because I think that's a piece where when we're in the mainstream of culture,
Yeah, there's all kinds.
we run into them, and it happens when we're sitting at the park or when we're
Right.
sitting waiting for Sunday school to get done. We find conversation partners easily, right? How do you do that? Or have you done that?
Not very well.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to find people who get it. I finally met a woman, girl, I would say girl, she's a woman, who also married into a family and had an older son that she was step-parent for. And we know a couple other lesbian couples who have kids. The hard part is, it's never been, I don't know anyone who had to balance, like, all the couples that I know, like, the dad isn't in the picture.
Oh.
Or not really, like, and so I never had anyone who could talk about what is that like, to be the oddball, the odd woman out.
Yeah.
So that's always been hard, but I think, maybe that's where I feel rejuvenated now a little bit, is like, I can actually let's have conversations about toddlers and what they do, and, that's refreshing, because it feels normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though fostering may not be, quote, normal.
Right, it's not normal.
In the mainstream.
Right.
Parenting that age where you're the primary caregiver.
Right, is normal.
Is normal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being an at-home mom, you and I have this conversation, what's it like in your early days,
Right.
going from working and parenting to now just parenting?
Yeah.
It's different.
It's totally weird. Yeah.
You
It's,
know?
yeah. I think I'm finally finding some sort of cadence or rhythm, but it's been kind of just a chaotic
Yeah.
4 months, I guess.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, last move I want to make is the gift that I think you're a gift to a lot of people outside of your immediate family. But I think the openness that you've had, you've blogged about it, you've invited people into your pain days and your celebration days, that you have, rather than retreat, seek out and say, maybe you don't understand it, but you love me, so would you be in conversation with
Right.
me? What is it like knowing that story and then being in a Christian public leadership role in a place, I'm gonna say this because your church doesn't maybe know how to do it, but they've been committed to thinking about it, right?
That's a really good way of putting it.
Just like you have said, I don't know how to do this, but there's been people that said, I don't know either, but I'll work it out with you, right? That that beginning step has been around, but they didn't have any clue what it meant.
No, I mean, part of me, I'm really, I'm a little bit ashamed of how we transitioned Marcy and the girls into Westwood. Because nobody really knew, and then I got married. And I think I had my own, I mean, again, it's this whole cultural, like, where are you going to be at? And will it be okay for me to work at this church and be out?
Because that's, for many congregations, it's not just a cultural thing, it's a theological thing, and so
And I never
various
assumed that
places.
Westwood as the congregation wouldn't be there. But who in the congregation might
That's
really
helpful.
have an issue with it.
Yeah.
And even Westwood had done really good work, probably, I was going to say 10, but now it's probably a dozen years ago or so, maybe 15 years ago then, to do some reconciling work. And unfortunately Tom Hunstead was there, and I think he was leading that, and he died, and it just stopped. And so although there was like a welcome statement made, and there's a welcome statement on their website.
The practice.
It wasn't confirmed.
Yeah.
So we asked Pastor Tanya, like, okay, will you do our wedding, and can we do it at Westwood? And she got really excited, like, this will be our first wedding, and then she stepped back and she was like, wait, I don't want to be the other pastor who just goes ahead and says yes. And so we stepped back, and there was a whole process that was beautiful, and it's nice to know that we initiated that process, or like re-picking up that process again.
Yeah.
But it got hard too, because then it was like it wasn't really at the church, and the church was kind of okay with it, but not okay with it, and the process hadn't been done yet, and so we just sort of like slid in, and I get really kind of sad thinking about that we didn't own it more. And people loved on the girls. They're not hard to love on, but they took them in a very cool way, and made great friends right away with church people. And so it was great to have that community to walk alongside us into the daily life. I mean, so for both Em and Jess, like, they got people that they would walk into school with, you know, and it wasn't, so that made the transition a lot better to be a part of Westwood, but I just feel, I feel like we kind of like, and I don't think that helped. I don't think that helped people's perception or understanding of what we are. It probably wasn't until the directory came out that people were like, oh, I get it. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we talk a lot about faith formations needing to connect with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of when I talk to people, it could be children's and family people, it could be pastors, it could be a whole variety of people. They're kind of a lot in that place where you were talking about the church, like, we know this and we know families all look different, but practically we have no clue how to do it. And we go back to our norms, right? Our cultural understandings where this is the normal family and everything else is weird, right? And so we sometimes even reinforce unhelpful things because we're naive or because we're patterned, right? So how would you, say, how would you welcome me today? Like, what could you say to some leaders that are in the place where Westwood was? They have, you don't have to convince them to be welcoming. They already really have it in their heart. They have no clue.
They have no clue. I think one of the biggest things, and I think this actually started with a paper maybe in your class, but about how do we, what does faith and church do for these different families, and what is our language? And I think that's the biggest thing, is to not necessarily use parents, but guardians, or, there's not, what's hard is there's not a great word that you can just put out there, so it ends up being like this big string of words. But that's one of the bigger things, and we made sure that all of our documentation or registration forms and whatever has like Guardian 1 and Guardian 2 instead of Parent 1, Parent 2, or even giving 3 slots for a parent. And it's hard, like, even databases aren't set up for that. Like, you can't connect multiple parents to one kid. Culture, society really needs to change. And unfortunately, the church is kind of going to be stuck in whatever boundaries there are now. So I do think it's, honestly, I don't know how to say this, but I think it's so helpful if there's clear leaders in the church that are open. And that made a difference for me coming to Westwood, was that there was a couple serving on the council who were open, and I just thought, I looked through the directory and there were a couple families, and I was like, awesome, this is, okay. I can do this place. And I think it mattered that I was a staff person there. And I think we were able to welcome families very differently because they saw someone in leadership in that way. And I hate that that's kind of what it takes. But it's hard to figure out how to connect with people. And hear their story and say, no, you really are welcome here, when there's nothing
Right.
represented to say, yes, come. I mean, I think the church is constantly struggling with that. We want all this kinds of diversity, but if it's not already in the church,
Right,
it's
for
really
sure.
hard to get there.
Well, and I also appreciate, so I've been in short term, like you're India, right?
Mm.
I've been short term in different cultures where I have so appreciated people just accompanying me
Right.
in that transition that are what I call bilingual.
Yeah. Right.
You know, culturally bilingual, not just
Right.
linguistically. And so I hear some of what happened on the ground was that,
Mm.
and people saying, well, we'll walk into school with you guys. Or, I don't know what it's like to foster, but I know what it's like to be a mom that was home with preschoolers after
Right.
having a full-time job and not having
Right.
a sentence put together and, you know, like, and I'll have coffee with you, or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Like, what would it be, I mean,
Mhm.
like if we could open up those kinds of, so you're not so alone,
Right.
right? What would be some concrete things that we could do to say, and,
Mhm.
the leadership and,
Mhm.
you know?
I mean, it sounds corny, but it's like the all are welcome statement. Like, if it's actually there, it matters.
Yeah.
I mean, I chose Westwood because it had a welcome statement on its website, and it was the only job I could get. But and I mean, I asked, "Are you a Reconciling in Christ congregation?" Because I saw that, and I think it was weird to hear no, because I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I think to say, like, your life is messy, come.
Yeah.
And we've used that language a lot, just to say, we don't know what your family looks like. We don't know what your day-to-day life looks like, and it might be super messy. My coworker always said, like, whether you have Cheerios in your hair, like, we don't care. We want you to come, and that's what's important, is coming.
Yeah.
And so to kind of dispel some of the, you have to look nice, and you have to be all together, and church is all about coming and looking good.
Right.
Just to say, come as you are, and that we don't know what that might be Monday night, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, I thank you for sharing your story. I have
Thanks.
appreciated and I have
Yeah.
learned from journeying with you, not only as a student here and watching you grow into that, but also of your discerning vocation, as you know well, but that's been a conversation, is multifaceted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this has really been about a vocational journey for you, but in that you brought other people
Yeah.
into this conversation, and we've learned a lot from that, so thanks
you.
for sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks.